The city was a maze of glass and steel, cold and impersonal under the afternoon sun. Andrew clutched his mother's hand tightly as they emerged from the glittering gala held at the Ritz, a place where wealth and influence mingled effortlessly. His navy blue suit was immaculate, his small polished shoes clicking softly against the marble floor, yet behind his composed exterior, a storm was quietly brewing. Andrew's gaze suddenly halted mid-step, his body stiffening as if frozen by an invisible tether. His mother, Clara, noticed immediately. Her practiced elegance faltered for a fleeting moment. "Andrew?" she asked gently, bending down to meet his wide, searching eyes. But Andrew said nothing. His eyes, usually so polite and distant, were now fixed on a figure crouched on the sidewalk near the corner, where shadows cast by towering buildings seemed to swallow the boy whole. There he was, a fragile figure no older than 8, barefoot and shirtless, his ribs etched beneath dusty skin, clutching a crumpled cardboard sign that simply read, "Food." The child's eyes, deep and hollow, reflected a hunger far beyond physical need, an emptiness carved by years of neglect and invisibility. For a long moment, Andrew and the boy locked eyes, as if tethered by some invisible thread from a past neither could fully articulate. Then Andrew whispered, almost as if confessing a secret to himself, "Mom, he's my brother." Clara blinked, confusion knitting her brows. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice laced with skepticism yet edged with something softer, an unexpected stir of something buried deep in her heart. "He's Malik," Andrew said, voice trembling but resolute. "He used to give me food when we were little in that place with the green beds. When I had nightmares, he held my hand." Clara's breath caught, the polished world she'd built around herself cracking ever so slightly. She had adopted Andrew as a baby, believing she was giving him a fresh start in a life of privilege and security. But now, standing here on a cold city street, the veneer of certainty began to chip away. Could there be a hidden chapter of Andrew's life she had never known? A brother she had never been told about? Andrew's small hand gripped hers with newfound urgency. "He's my big brother. He always shared with me, even when he was hungry too." Around them, the hum of the city seemed to fade. Faces turned, whispers rippled through the crowd that had started to gather. Drivers slowed, their eyes flickering with curiosity and judgment. But Andrew was unshaken. In that moment, beneath the glint of skyscrapers and the distant clinking of champagne glasses, a boy in a perfect suit reached out across years and circumstance to claim a brother lost to time and fate. And Clara, for the first time in a long time, felt the weight of a story she had never expected to hear, a story not of wealth or status, but of survival, love, and the fragile threads that bind us even when the world tries to tear them apart. The scent of damp earth and peeling paint was etched deep into Malik's memory, a lingering echo of a place that had long since vanished from the maps and minds of the world. It was the orphanage, the place with the green beds, as Andrew had called it, the shadowy cradle of their childhoods, where laughter was scarce and hope even scarcer. Malik closed his eyes, the coarse cardboard of the sign still pressed against his palm, and for a fleeting moment, he was back there, a small boy wrapped in threadbare clothes, eyes wide with silent fear but heart stubbornly resilient. He remembered the nights when the cold crept through the thin walls like a silent predator, and the green beds, hard and unyielding, offered little comfort. But in the darkness, there was Andrew, the quiet boy with the perfect suit and trembling voice, who had been less a stranger and more a lifeline. Malik recalled the way Andrew's small hand would find his, grasping tightly through the loneliness, anchoring him against the tempest of their shared misery. They hadn't had much, just scraps of food Malik managed to scavenge and stories whispered between ragged breaths, but it was enough. It was everything. Malik's thoughts drifted to the cruel indifference of the adults who came and went, their eyes glazing over at the sight of 2 ragged boys curled in a corner, their hunger dismissed as an unfortunate detail. He remembered the sharp sting of rejection when he was declared unfit for adoption, an invisible line drawn in red ink that severed his chance at a new life. The pain of that moment was raw, A wound reopened every time he thought of Andrew being taken away, whisked into a world he could only glimpse through a fog of longing and unanswered questions. Yet, despite the years of hardship, Malik held onto something intangible, an unspoken promise made in those dark days. No matter how far apart they were forced to be, no matter the silence imposed by strangers, their bond endured. It was a tether forged in shared hunger, whispered dreams, and the faint, stubborn glow of brotherly love. That love had survived neglect and time, waiting silently for the moment it would be remembered, reclaimed. As Malik looked up, meeting Andrew's eyes again on that crowded sidewalk, the past and present converged. The weight of forgotten years pressed down, but beneath it lay a fragile hope, a chance to rewrite the story, to heal the invisible scars that had shaped them both. The green beds, the cold nights, the empty stomachs, they were no longer just memories. They were the foundation of a bond that neither time nor circumstance could break. Clara's world, always so meticulously ordered, suddenly felt like it was unraveling thread by thread. The polished surface of her life, the gala, the impeccably tailored suits, the smooth hum of carefully curated success, flickered against the raw, unsettled reality now standing before her. The boy on the street, Malik, with his dusty skin and haunted eyes, was a living contradiction to everything she believed about her son's past. Her mind raced, struggling to bridge the gulf between the immaculate narrative she'd been told and the trembling truth unfolding in front of her. At first, there was disbelief, a visceral, protective instinct that whispered this must be a mistake, an illusion conjured by her son's imagination or the cruel tricks of the city. But Andrew's conviction was unwavering, his small hands gripping hers with a desperation that pierced through her carefully maintained detachment. "He's my brother," he had said, and something deep inside Clara, buried beneath years of control and denial, stirred with a mixture of guilt and unease. Her heart clenched with a sudden, suffocating weight, the knowledge that for years she had unknowingly closed the door on a part of Andrew's life that was as real and vital as the air he breathed. The agency had told her only half the story, or perhaps none at all. The paperwork, the promises, the assurances, it all seemed meaningless now, a fragile facade that had masked a harsher truth. How many nights had she spent dreaming of giving Andrew everything he never had, only to realize now that there had been someone else, someone equally deserving, someone forgotten. Clara's breath hitched as she looked again at Malik. There was no pleading in his eyes, no anger or bitterness, only a quiet, profound resilience that spoke of battles fought and survived in silence. This boy, this ghost from a hidden past, was real. And the woman who had once prided herself on mastery over every detail of her life now faced a reality she could neither control nor deny. Her voice faltered as she knelt beside them, trying to steady the trembling in her hands and heart. "Malik," she said softly, "I want to help you. I want to bring you home." The words felt both monumental and terrifying, an admission that her family, her understanding of love and loyalty, must expand beyond the boundaries she'd long set. In that moment, Clara was no longer the polished matriarch of a privileged world. She was a mother grappling with loss, hope, and the fragile possibility of redemption. The gala, the champagne, the applause, all faded into insignificance compared to the fragile connection between two boys who had never stopped remembering each other and a mother who, for the first time, realized that family was not defined by bloodlines or legal papers, but by the heart's capacity to hold the forgotten and the broken. The moment Andrew's small arms wrapped around Malik, time seemed to pause in a fragile, trembling stillness. For Malik, years of silence and abandonment converged into a single heartbeat, and the walls he had built around his pain cracked just enough to let in a sliver of light. The embrace was hesitant at first, a fragile thread binding two fractured souls, but beneath the surface, it carried the weight of unspoken promises and shared memories too deep to forget. Andrew's face pressed against Malik's worn jacket, his breath shaky yet steady, as if clinging to the reality of the boy who had once been his only friend in a world that had refused them both. Malik's hands, rough and calloused from years of struggle, hovered uncertainly before settling gently on Andrew's back, offering the silent comfort of a brother's touch. Neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary, even impossible, because in that embrace, everything was said and understood. The crowd that had gathered around them blurred into insignificance. Faces softened, some eyes glistened with tears, and the city's usual cacophony seemed to dim. Clara, standing nearby, felt a tidal wave of emotions crash through her: relief, sorrow, guilt, and a fierce determination, all tangled in one overwhelming surge. She saw not just two boys reunited, but a chance for healing that had been denied for too long. In that poignant reunion, the ghosts of the past no longer haunted, but instead whispered of resilience. Malik's journey from the shadows of rejection and neglect had brought him here, not as a victim, but as a survivor worthy of love and belonging. Andrew's unwavering faith in the bond they shared had bridged the chasm carved by years of separation and silence. As they finally pulled apart, their eyes locked, silent vows exchanged in that gaze. They were brothers, not just by fate or circumstance, but by a love that had weathered storms no child should endure. This was not the end of their story, but a beginning, fraught with challenges, but illuminated by hope. The street where they reunited, once a place of loneliness and despair, now held the promise of home, belonging, and the unbreakable ties of family reborn. Clara sat alone in the dim glow of her study, the mahogany desk cluttered with files, yellowed papers, and a cold cup of untouched tea. The silence of the night pressed in on her, a stark contrast to the bustling gala just hours before. But now, the polished veneer of her world was peeling away, revealing a hidden, painful truth she was only beginning to confront. The adoption agency's records lay open before her, their typed words cold and clinical, yet beneath the surface, they whispered stories of neglect, omission, and fractured lives. Her fingers trembled as she scanned the pages, eyes catching on a faded entry. Two boys registered within days of each other, sharing the same intake week, the same cramped dormitory, the same fragile hope for a future that seemed just out of reach. Then, the dam of bureaucratic indifference cracked wide open. There it was, a stark, red line crossing out Malik's name, followed by the damning words, "Deemed unfit, adoption not recommended." The cold finality of those words hit Clara like a blow, a harsh verdict passed without compassion or explanation. She felt her breath hitch, the weight of guilt and helplessness anchoring her heart. How had this boy, so integral to her son's earliest memories, been erased from the narrative? What unseen battles had led to his abandonment once more, and why had no one, no agency, no social worker, ever raised a voice on his behalf? The discovery was more than just paperwork. It was a shattering reckoning. Each line, each annotation, was a testament to a system that had failed two innocent children, splitting them apart with cold bureaucracy and blind neglect. Clara's mind raced. How many nights had Andrew longed for Malik's presence, dreaming of the comfort only a brother could offer? And all this time, Malik had been lost in the shadows, forgotten not just by the world, but by the very people sworn to protect him. As the hours stretched on, Clara's initial shock transformed into a fierce resolve. This wasn't just a story of loss, it was a call to action. She needed to unearth every detail, to fight through the tangled web of red tape and silence. For Andrew, for Malik, for the fragile thread that still connected them despite years of separation. She reached for her phone again, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside. "Find everything," she said firmly to her investigator. "Every file, every note, every forgotten name." Outside, the city's lights flickered as dawn approached, but inside Clara's study, a new light was kindling, one born not of privilege or power, but of love's relentless determination to reclaim what had been lost, to bring the forgotten back into the light. Clara sat motionless for a long moment, the weight of the revelation pressing down like a stone on her chest. The sterile glow of her office lamp flickered slightly, casting elongated shadows that seemed to mimic the turmoil inside her. She thought of Andrew, her perfect, polished son, dressed neatly in his navy suit, the image of a child untouched by hardship. Yet beneath that tailored exterior lay memories she had never known, bonds forged in a forgotten past. Malik, the boy in tattered clothes, with haunted eyes and a story unspoken, was not just a stranger on the street. He was a part of Andrew's story, a piece of his soul that had been severed by cruel fate and negligent hands. The rational part of Clara, shaped by years of corporate precision and control, wrestled fiercely with the emotional storm threatening to overwhelm her. She felt the old instincts, the urge to compartmentalize, to keep the past buried beneath layers of denial. But as she glanced again at the photo on her phone, where Andrew clung to Malik like a lifeline, the truth became undeniable. This was no longer about convenience or social image. It was about justice, love, and the raw human need to belong. Clara's fingers tightened around her phone as she made the decision. This boy, Malik, would not be left to fade into oblivion. She would bring him inside the world she had built for Andrew, not as a charity case, but as family. The process would be complex, fraught with legal hurdles and social judgments, but Clara knew she had the resources and the resolve to see it through. For the first time in years, the polished woman of business shed her armor, allowing vulnerability to take root alongside determination. She envisioned the moment she would introduce Malik to her home, how Andrew's eyes would light up, how Malik might tentatively step into a new life filled with warmth, security, and the promise of healing. It was a daunting path, but one she was willing to walk, no matter how uncertain the steps ahead. Because some things, some people, are worth fighting for beyond all logic or fear. As dawn crept over the city skyline, Clara felt a fragile hope begin to bloom amid the ruins of past neglect. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "This time, we won't let you go." And with that vow, the first chapter of their new story began. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions, small victories, and silent struggles. Malik's arrival into Clara's meticulously ordered life was like a sudden gust of wind shaking the fragile glass of her carefully constructed world. For Malik, stepping into the warmth of a home for the first time was both a relief and a new kind of fear, unfamiliar walls, strange faces, and a life so different from the one he had known. His eyes, once wary and guarded, flickered with tentative curiosity, but shadows of abandonment still clung to his every movement. Andrew, ever the quiet and composed boy, became Malik's anchor. His steady presence was a balm to Malik's frayed nerves, a reminder that the bond they once shared had not been erased by years or distance. Their afternoons were filled with slow, cautious conversations, shared stories, and the awkward dance of two brothers rediscovering one another. Sometimes Malik would retreat into silence, haunted by memories he didn't yet know how to speak aloud, while Andrew listened with patient understanding, sensing the depth beneath the surface. Clara watched them with a mixture of awe and helplessness. The therapist's office became a sanctuary where Malik began peeling back layers of pain, the neglect, the hunger, the endless nights of uncertainty. Each session unearthed fragments of a past too heavy for a child to bear alone. Yet with every tear shed and every word spoken, Malik was reclaiming a part of himself that had been lost. Clara found herself learning to hold space for this pain without trying to fix it immediately, realizing that healing was neither swift nor neat. The family dinners were quiet at first. Malik's manners were unpolished. He sometimes startled at sudden noises or withdrew when voices rose. But slowly, laughter began to weave its way into those rooms, fragile but persistent. Andrew introduced Malik to his friends, proudly calling him my big brother, and Malik, in turn, began to dream of futures he had never dared to imagine, school projects, birthdays, even holidays spent in a house that finally felt like home. Yet beneath the surface, Clara wrestled with her own doubts. Could she ever fully erase the scars left by years of separation? Would Malik ever trust that this new life wasn't just another illusion? She caught herself watching him when he thought no one was looking, trying to read the silent language of his eyes, hoping to understand how to be the mother he needed. There were nights she lay awake, haunted by the possibility of failure, terrified that the fragile thread holding them together might fray. But every morning, as Malik and Andrew faced the day side by side, Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose. This journey wasn't about perfection. It was about presence, patience, and the courage to rebuild what had been broken. Slowly, piece by piece, their fractured family began to stitch itself together, not by forgetting the past, but by honoring it and choosing love as their guide forward. Family. The word echoed in Clara's mind with a resonance deeper than any boardroom victory or social acclaim. It was a concept she had once believed she understood fully, wrapped in neat definitions of bloodlines and shared names, but now it unraveled and rewove itself in the quiet spaces between Andrew and Malik. Watching the two boys navigate their fragile new relationship, she saw that family was less about flawless beginnings and more about the messy, imperfect act of choosing to stay, to heal, to forgive. The scars Malik carried were not invisible. They were etched into his cautious smiles and the way he flinched at sudden touches, a testament to the years when love was absent and neglect was routine. Yet, those very scars were also proof of resilience, of a heart battered but unbroken, longing for connection. Clara realized that family was not a safe haven simply because it was easy or comfortable. It was a sanctuary precisely because it demanded courage. Courage to face the wounds, to acknowledge the pain, and to dare to hope despite it all. For Andrew, family was suddenly more expansive than the polished dinners and charitable galas he was used to. It was about holding a hand that trembled with fear, about learning to speak a language of empathy instead of silence. It was seeing Malik not as an outsider, but as the brother who had once been his protector in a forgotten time, a presence that completed a piece of himself he hadn't known was missing. Clara watched her son grow in ways no school or tutor could teach, in compassion, in patience, and in an understanding that love is a verb, not just a word. And for Clara herself, the meaning of family shifted from control and appearances to vulnerability and grace. She found herself letting down walls, embracing uncertainty, and redefining what it meant to be a mother. Family, she learned, was not about having all the answers, but about showing up, fully, imperfectly, and with unwavering commitment. It was the late nights sitting beside Malik as he wrestled with nightmares, the quiet moments of shared laughter when Andrew taught Malik to ride a bike, the tears shed in private rooms when the weight of their shared past threatened to overwhelm them all. In this evolving tapestry of love and pain, Clara understood that family was both fragile and fierce, a delicate balance of holding on and letting go. It was not a story written once and for all, but an ongoing narrative shaped by forgiveness, hope, and the relentless human desire to belong. And as she looked at her two sons, connected not just by circumstance, but by an unbreakable bond forged in hardship and healing, Clara knew that this was what mattered most. That family, above all, was a promise to remember, to protect, and to love without condition, no matter how long the road.